Time, and my apologies for the delay in getting us started. We had a session with the EDA and City Council right before this. Staff did a fantastic job of teeing up the timeline on when we needed to keep the discussion moving, and then I completely failed to follow the plan. So my apologies for the delay tonight in getting started. But with that, I'll call tonight's working session to order. And Christina, we just want a note roll for the record.
Yes.
And I would like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have open forum scheduled for this evening. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of your choosing. And see who signed up. Thank you. And Nick Hedberg, if you would just rise and
Yeah.
would you just state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, I'm Nicholas Hedberg. I live at 843 12th Avenue Southeast, Forest Lake. I have 3 children, 15, a son, 12, my daughter Maya, and 2, another son. And this is my wife, Tiffany. So yeah, we're just part of the community and interested in hearing about Belts Park and want to just be here to support the work that, is gonna, or should be done to that park. The condition of the park, as some of you may know, is pretty bad. It's pretty poor, especially the courts. I feel like the park equipment is actually decent, but the courts and the fields really need attention. Other communities like Shoreview, maybe you've seen their park. They have a park behind their community center. It is top notch. It is something that maybe Forest Lake as a community could maybe, try and live to that standard. Yeah, it's something to look at. Other topics I kind of want to bring up, like our downtown. It seems like there's not much we can do there. I mean, the theater building is kind of a disaster, and I mean, there might not be much we can do about our downtown, but the parks is something that we can be proud of and we can fix and improve on. So if we can give that more attention, that'd be great. Also fixing the parks, and this will help reflect the property taxes that have gone up. Really, our parks haven't to me haven't really improved, but yet our taxes have gone up. So yeah, I just wanted to come here and just support Belts Park, and we're curious to hear what you guys have to say about the plan moving forward. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Susan Young.
Hi, I'm Susan Young. I live at 9950 199th Street North. Tonight, I noticed 40 minutes ago that y'all were going to be talking about athletic fields tonight. I'm on the FLA board. I am not speaking on behalf of FLA. I am speaking as a FLA member who attends every monthly meeting. Our athletic fields, the FLA, specifically athletic fields in Cooling Camp, need help. We've been asking for more than 3 years for ag line to be handled in the baseball fields to make them better playable, to deal with some of the surfaces. That's been a problem, and I realize that Public Works has a huge number of priorities. But if the city is going to be managing, then they need to manage. We have issues in the football and lacrosse fields with holes, have had troubles with sprinkler heads and keeping those in place. It's going to be especially important this year. Those of us that do a little bit of agricultural work are really scared about what's going to happen this year with ag and turf and pastures and ag. To keep our fields playable, sprinkler systems are going to be really important. The athletic fields aren't just a really good place for our youth to learn sporting skills, leadership skills, social skills. They are an important economic driver for this city. Fast and Furious, 59 teams, when they opened it up this year, they filled up in a week. They had a lot more teams that want to play. If we happen to have lights, perhaps we could expand that. 59 teams times 12 to 14 kids on a team, times a couple of parents, a few sibs, grandpas and grandpas, 4 of them, and aunts and uncles. That is a significant number of people coming to our community. The FLA football team regularly plays teams from Montevideo, from Chisago, from North Branch, from Wisconsin. Those folks are all coming to this community. They're here for the day. Ditto. Sibs, parents, grandparents coming to see their kids play. The Fast and Furious, the Freeze tournament, we had folks coming there, 180 teams from all over Minnesota and Wisconsin. 180 teams, times again, 8 kids, times parents, and those of you that have kids, that have grandparents in the region, know that they travel with the kids. The FLA organization, the FLA sports, those are just the ones that I managed to find out in some minutes, are a significant economic driver for this community and could be much better if the city would partner with us and invest in the fields and in the facilities. Again, as a board member, not on behalf of the entire FLA organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in open forum this evening? All right, let's move into our planned agenda items. Just a couple quick items of logistics. So this is a working session tonight. It's far more, we're gonna find us in a far more informal fashion than if we were downstairs in chambers. We don't have planned public comment planned in the agenda, but one of the reasons we like this format up here is if you have burning questions as we're going, I generally, if we have some time, we're happy to take some additional questions or points of feedback throughout the agenda. So if you have a question, give me a hand raise or something. I might not call on you right away, but before we close out that item, we'll try to get some points of impact or some points of discussion from the audience. So if you have something you'd like to contribute, there is generally some opportunity for that. That said, we are also trying to manage time, and so we can have some additional feedback, but we can't be here till midnight generally. So that has managed itself very well in the past, and I'm happy to provide, again, it's one of the benefits of being in this more informal setting. And then just a reminder, anything we talk about tonight that requires official action by council will come back before council on a regular agenda. This truly is just a working session and an opportunity to share some ideas, give some direction to staff, and help to come to conclusion for future council action. So with that, let's kind of open up our first item of discussion, which is the special events permits and policies. And
that'll be me. So Mayor and Council, thanks for having me tonight. I am here to walk through a special events review. I'm going to take just a couple minutes to go through the staff memo that I've prepared to give you a little bit of background, review and analysis, and what have you, and then really want to spend some time getting some council feedback and direction at the end of this review tonight to guide staff forward. So special events in Forest Lake. Last year, staff attended the City Council workshop on May 15th for a preliminary introduction to the City Council on this topic. This stemmed from the staff reviewing essentially outdoor entertainment permits that were coming through to the city, which is in our city code and required for any outdoor events with amplified sound. So that is currently in our city code. However, staff working together realized that there were some cumbersome pieces to this process. You know, what if there's an event in the park that doesn't require amplified music? What if alcohol is being served or sold? We just really started realizing that there were a lot of siloed activities and not really one cohesive effort in reviewing special events in Forest Lake. The downtown revitalization plan calls for more events and activation. The staff just really, through all of these challenges we identified, wanted to find a solution. So we came to the council and said, here's what we've identified, and we're given direction to continue forward, really to analyze special events in the community. So with that background, we really wanted to come up with one special events permit application that would be inclusive of all event logistics that city staff may need to be involved in or need to understand, because there were some gaps in that with just the previous process. Really work together across all departments to understand the needs of every individual event, whether it's public or private. And then we want to leave this with, updating policies so that it backs the new process. So that's the history and kind of why we're here. So again, I talked a little bit about it, but again, last year, staff across all departments met once a month, and we really tracked every special event that came into Forest Lake from January 1st through December 31st of last year. And through that process, as we sat down monthly as staff, we really started talking more about what some of the requests city staff were getting in different departments. We started documenting all of that, what permits or licenses were required, and really started working on building this special events permit application. We worked on that throughout June through about October, where we ended up getting to a draft special events permit application that all departments felt included all the information that would be necessary for staff review. Again, just trying to provide a streamlined and efficient process, not only for event organizers coming into the community, but for staff as well, to be efficient and responsible with their time. So through that process, there were about 35 events we documented last year, and they had a really wide range. So some were as simple as just amplified music. So one example is Hosanna Lutheran Church does outdoor mass services in June through October, so they're gonna have a sound system. That's a very simple request. And then obviously to the large scale of the 4th of July festival is the biggest in the community. So I handed out a chart here. I summarized this information just to give council and staff and the community an idea of what types of events we have coming into the community. Some of these are private events, open to the public. Some are private, like a graduation party in someone's backyard. We also have public events that are open, that are city planned and led, like obviously Arts in the Park. We had the Rotary Winter Plunge. So just this gives you an idea. Again, amplified music. We have a section of races and regattas. So we had some winter races. We have the annual Ragnar Race Series that comes through Forest Lake. Twin Cities Powerboat Races is an annual event, and then the Turkey Trot. Another category is tournaments and sports events. So we've had multiple fishing tournaments. We have a lot of the FLA and athletic tournaments at Fenway. Last year we had a Fox 9 Town Ball Tour, which brought in a lot of people to the community, and other club baseball tournaments. We have some other miscellaneous events, like Lao Temple has a festival at their premises, the Remax Synergy Block Party, private property but public event, open to the public. The high school has a couple different events where city resources are needed for homecoming and graduation, cross-country meets.
Is Castlewood, are those held, are those held somewhere on city property? Is that why that particular is called out?
They're not held on city property. I believe they still need help with like public safety or street no parking. And then festivals and community events. So I just put this together to kind of give council an idea of the range of events that are coming in and how they really can trigger different event requirements and permitting that might be necessary. And the larger the event, the more resources that might be needed, the more time staff might need to review and approve, and just more approvals might be needed, whether it's a gambling license, liquor license from the state of Minnesota, et cetera. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of summarizing what we learned last year. And the other thing we really learned as we went through this process is not only that there are a lot of events taking place, most of the events have some impact on city resources. So as we said as a group, well, one department might, have one task that's requested of them, whether it's grading a street or putting out no parking signs. Some events require public safety, so a police officer, depending on attendance and if there's alcohol served and consumed. So we really started looking at what's that impact on city resources. So I documented some of that, which you can see as well in the staff memo. there's hard cost, opportunity cost, and overtime costs. And so we really just started to look at those 3 different breakdowns. And I provided just a sampling because we just started working through this, and that's something we want to continue to track given council feedback tonight. But this hopefully gives you an idea of, just a sampling of events to see where city resources are being requested. So with that, really we just are looking at improving the process. You would see included in the packet is the special events permit application that the city staff have come up with. Again, all departments have reviewed and agreed that it covers what would be, we think, necessary to make sure we're protecting not only public safety, but just public infrastructure and just making sure we're covered as a city on any liability. So we're at a point now where we've gotten this far, we've collected a lot of information and feel like we're on a good path to move forward. We do need some council direction because this, certainly will require some ordinance amendments, some approval process review of what council's level of interest is in approving of these. So with that, I'm going to pause there. I can see if there's any questions. Otherwise, there are 4 issues before council for discussion tonight, and we can kind of just go through those one at a time. But I'm happy to pause there and see if there's any comments or questions before we go into council feedback.
Just one quick question, is that application, is that an online form that people can fill out on the website?
It currently is not. It's a fillable PDF. We certainly can get that into our system in our forms, similar to the current outdoor entertainment permit. And essentially what it would be is we would just break it down by section. So the applicant will just go through those and we would build that on there. Yep.
Any other general questions before we jump into?
I know it varies, but is there kind of a typical amount that we charge for permit fees and that kind of thing?
So that's a good question, and for council feedback tonight as well. Our outdoor entertainment permit has been $50. And that's, I believe, the only fee that I'm aware of for the outdoor entertainment permit, $50. And that's an administrative fee for managing.
Isn't there 10 feet and stuff?
There's a tent permit fee. I'm not sure, that's never really crossed my desk of what that costed, but I'm assuming it's similar, 50. So right now, if somebody would have an outdoor event, you could just apply for the outdoor entertainment permit, which is $50, and then there's the option with a tent. I don't know if the fee changes or not for that, but there is like a tent inspection fee.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna bring up. It has to be inspected.
Yes,
Yeah.
certain size tents for different events, and there's a fee for
Pass
that.
and all that kind of stuff, all in the same.
$50. Anything over 10 by 10 is $50, if I remember.
Good questions, any others?
Then on the, so this other miscellaneous, the Remax block party, for example, what city staff does that require other than just the permit for the outdoor and the amplified music?
So that one I listed, I believe there's some public safety component of, I don't know if police has officers for that one, whether they're on duty or off duty, just due to the, I believe, alcohol consumption and the number of people that are there. So there's some police.
So that would be a requirement for the property owner to pay an off-duty police officer, maybe?
Essentially, I believe that, and that's where some of this is conversation, so that we can get to a consistent model, so that if there's a certain threshold of number of attendees, or if alcohol is served or not, like what are those thresholds? When would police, or security be required of event organizers? That's not clearly defined in our current process.
That's what I was just gonna ask.
So,
So it's not, that's not currently defined. So how do we decide today if it's not spelled out in policy? How do we decide if off-duty officer is required?
I believe that's just right now up to the department. And I think, and that's where, through this process, really would like to get to a point of consistency and policy or guidelines that say, if this, then this one officer is required, or et cetera. And what are those thresholds? What are those triggers to require it? And then what's that cost?
Generally, so I know that since it's not defined in policy, maybe there's not a universal rule, but generally, if it is a city-sponsored event, it seems, based on the review of what's in the packet, that that's provided by police-provided overtime. And then if it's a private event, is that generally when it's going to be paid off duty? Is there, I guess my question maybe is are there times where we have private events and it's city, paid overtime? Do we know if that's a
I
scenario?
believe right now, if it's a private event, it's either paid off duty or overtime. I don't know for certain, but I believe it's one of those other. So I think that would be a follow-up with that department.
Has it risen, that topic of off-duty, has that risen to a level of concern of not wanting that to be off-duty and instead it's contracted through the city? There's many municipalities who have stepped away from allowing off-duty and they want everything to be kind of coming through the city, and that reimbursement mechanism still happens, that event sponsor pays for the off-duty. I might be pulling us into a topic that isn't up for consideration tonight, but it would be interesting to just, as part of this question, evaluate whether fully paid off-duty is still the right approach, or because that's an officer wearing a force-like uniform representing the city, that we want more control and it should be city. The city, that employee is, that officer is attending as an employee and the organization is reimbursing the city for those costs.
I think that's a good point for definitely follow-up, because there has been some conversation across staff on when is the trigger for security or needed, and is it, what type of security? Would we allow for a private, if it's a private event, can they hire their own security company? It doesn't have to be city police, like officers, so certainly we'll have some follow-up on that for you. So any other questions? Otherwise, we'll kind of just go through these in order here for the council feedback, if you don't mind. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how we currently have in our city code ordinance for outdoor or for amplified music. That's currently in city code. So if we move to this new system of a special events permit and application, this is going to require us staff to amend or repeal and replace of some kind the current ordinance. So we just looking for direction tonight if the council is supportive of staff dedicating some time right now to that. And second to that question, we do have some budgeted legal resources. So if yes, would that be, is the council favorable to staff using some of those budgeted legal dollars for ordinance amendments? So we'll start there if you have any feedback.
So what's the ordinance amendment about?
It would be, so currently the outdoor entertainment permit, it's chapter 92 in our code for outdoor entertainment. So that code defines right now what the process would be if you had an event outdoors that was going to have amplified sound. And while that really isn't all encompassing of an event, right? Like that's just one trigger. That's just amplified sound. So what happens about all of the other things? And this is very specific to outdoor entertainment. So if you're gonna have a band, or if you're gonna have a sound system for a walk or run, like you would need to submit this for our city code. Kind of defines as all of the things, what the fees are, et cetera. So if we would go to this new special events process, we would need code specific.
All that too.
Yeah, so essentially, don't quote me, but likely a repeal and replace mentality of getting rid of this and replacing with special events ordinance. That would be more definitions, more encompassing of the things we talked about.
And better outline some of the policy that obviously we have to come back to the council as we work through this process to get some policy direction, but to better solidify our policies and code. Right now, there's a lot of activities that have been occurring over the years, and it's kind of, well, we all know what we need to do for you insert the event here, but we don't really have a lot in the code that's really helping guide how we're doing that business. And that's just something that staff needs, but also the public. We've seen a rise in community events. There's, I think the council and the EDA would like to see more activation within the community, and having better ordinance to guide you as a private event holder, because that's, most of our events are privately planned, privately conducted, but on public land. Like right now, we don't really even have anything saying you have to provide insurance.
I'll jump in with some feedback. So my thought is, yes, it's important, it would be nice to get to that spot. So I would be okay heading down this path, the timing of which I would defer somewhat to staff, because we're gonna talk about a host of park items this evening, and so where that fits, I don't feel like this needs to be burning at the top of the list, but and it's also where I have a little bit of a blind spot of where does this fit within the mix of everything that staff's working on. So I'm supportive of the efforts, the timing and the prioritization. I'd be looking for some staff feedback based on other feedback items that we're constantly giving you on where does this fit. And again, I don't feel like it needs to be burned to the top of the list, but it certainly would be good to address.
I would tend to agree, unless we're getting a lot of complaints about this and confusion on this, helping put on the street dance and rotary plunge and different things. It seems pretty seamless. I know it's not perfect, but I've had good experiences, personally doing events in the city on public land. And so I would agree, it'd be nice to get some not closure, but just get things worked out so that it is more clear to the resident and the person putting it on. But it wouldn't be a huge priority right now for me personally, based on everything else we have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supportive of that work, so.
I'm supportive of ordinance as well.
Yeah, some sort of a standard.
I think it also just naturally follows then that if we're doing this work, it's related to the ordinance, we obviously need to invest in the legal resources just to make sure that we're in compliance. So I think that naturally follows, but again, timing of when, I'm open to when does it fit into the work plan.
Perfect. Okay, so the next item for council feedback. So right now is the review and approval process. So currently, most of the applications that come in, you're seeing them as outdoor entertainment permits. Those come to city council. If there's a park event permit, those go to the Parks Commission and then council. So is the council favorable to hearing staff recommendations on varying approval levels? So some potentially administratively approved, commission approval or council approval. Would you like staff to put together some ideas for a future meeting? Would you be interested in seeing that and what that would look like? That's
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of the events that happen are new events, right? I mean, they're legacy events, and so I don't know if they necessarily need to come before the council unless there's something really unique. I guess I would maybe just make sure that there's an appeal process if an event got turned down for some crazy reason, that the event organizer had a means to be like, well, wait a minute, let me put 2 cents.
Yeah, those are working with a standard, there'd be no reason for the council to make every decision, there's no question about it. Here's what we expect, this is what, especially with,
I don't need to,
timings and that kind of thing.
I don't need to see every graduation, party request come through consent agenda. And so some sort of threshold that's just administratively approved, I certainly would be open to.
I agree. I think that'll be, staff will take a look at that and bring back some recommendations and figure that.
Now, the ones where they're asking you to shut down the street, maybe those, yes, that needs to come.
And that was
That's
part of
probably
our
a no.
staff conversation of what are those triggers and thresholds that may be different and need council consideration of approval. The third question, how would council like to see the impact on city resources for special events in Forest Lake?
So one example in the staff report, you saw a handful of different events broken down by departments and the hard opportunity and overtime costs. Would you want to see that information as events come through? Do you want to start seeing what the anticipated impact could be to the public sector?
And I have in other communities have seen where there's like a section at the bottom by department of like, each department head has to indicate what their estimated fiscal impact would be for that event. So it's coming through, let's just say it is one that's council approved, bigger festival, that would be listed on the bottom. That council is essentially aware of that at that time, at the time of approval.
So did we just start tracking this last year, essentially?
Yep, essentially, our focus was really what the events were, what was requested of each department for that event, and then department heads did come back and put estimated cost to that. So it was definitely estimations, tracked pretty high level, but just enough to get us an idea of, you know, oh, for this event, we need to bring barricades, and this event, we need to have, you know, there's traffic control, et cetera. And then what was that impact on the resources?
And I think the question too is, Jamie and Abby went through the 3 different types. Do you really need to see all of those? Is it just the hard costs and the overtime costs maybe? You know, what would be helpful? Opportunity costs, you know, we're already paying folks to be here. It's just that opportunity of not having done something else instead of that event. So there's not, that one I could see as maybe not as much of a fiscal impact when it comes to like budgets and whatnot. But maybe you want to know that so that you know what staff is spending their time on if they're not getting other things done that you might want them to be focused on.
I really appreciate that we have this information, right? Like that we've taken the time to quantify and, you know, have this conversation. I wonder if, rather than that being event by event, ultimately it needs to be event by event, but at the council level, I wonder if there is, as part of, I don't know where this necessarily fits in the budget process, but as part of a discussion at the council level of here's planned community events for the upcoming year. And built into each of our departments is support for those planned events. So Public Works is planning on barricades, and the fire department is planning on trucks on the parade route on the 4th of July. And just all of that stuff is just, here's kind of the baseline, so that then when something changes throughout the year and we're considering an application, if there's so some sort of a change in an event that all of a sudden now we need to do something different, that information can come forward to council as part of the application of heads up, this is what we had planned for, but now the request is this and the impact is, so we're really only talking about the differences because the underlying costs are kind of built into budget and built into department plans. I'm trying to kind of blend having the information but without being too administratively too red tapey at the approval level when a fair amount of it can be planned for and it's just kind of ordinary course of business.
I think there's a pretty definite line between a totally private, I suppose you call it exercise or a private party or whatever you want to call it, compared to what's open to the public, the parade or whatever the case would be. I think there's a little bit of a different line there too. So might be something to consider there too.
I guess my one struggle with hauling that out, whether it's just the hard costs or whatever, is that unless we're going to also add into that the economic impact, the positive economic impact of bringing all these families into the community,
Right.
I think we're really looking at half the equation.
You're right.
And that can get sideways really, really quick.
And that's really where the difference is between the private and the public. Okay, and you know,
I think that's one of the reasons why I like this is just embedded in what we do every day. Like we support the Rotary Plunge, we support the 4th of July. There's just, these are what's planned community events, is built into budget. Yes, that all has cost associated with it.
That's why we exist.
Right. But then it also allows for the conversation with the applicant if there's all of a sudden a spur of the moment request that's unplanned for, that it's going to require, I don't know, you know, extra security or extra public works, impact or whatever that might be, that then we've got that, we know it's been unplanned and we can have that conversation with the event planner. So,
Mayor, I think to your point, when the Legion came asking for another day,
yes.
something like that, which
Yes.
is an unexpected cost that we're been used to for over years, but then you add another day, that is extra cost.
That's a great example, yes.
I think with the information that we have this year on the events that we did last year, we might be able to better help as these come through. Again, our processes aren't changing immediately, but I think we might be able to better anticipate that extra day.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, this request is asking another day. It's going to cost X in hard opportunity and overtime costs. But it sounds like you don't necessarily want to see those costs broken out in every request that's coming before you.
I would and that with, although I appreciate that you are tracking that staff is like that, those numbers are available so that we have it. It's more of, it's not necessarily part of the individual approval process, because I don't want there to be this, that's costing the city. Well, it's also part of what we do. To your point, it's not, reflective of the overall ROI of the event. It is only half the equation.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you did say you'd like to maybe talk about this at budget.
I think it's a great time to talk about it.
So you at least see what some of those, what events are kind of costing us. It is a part of standard business, but it does detract from some of those other operations that we.
It does give us also a better indication on when we're talking about setting fees. We do that very in the dark today, and this gives us some indication on if we're talking about all of them at once and those costs are going up, maybe that's when we have to consider offsetting with some greater fees or.
And that's a great segue into the fourth and final conversation for tonight. Is would the council like staff to explore event permit funding options to reduce the city's impact on hard opportunity and overtime costs? So fee schedule, as we get into that, a special events section, whether or not that's, rental of barricades and garbage cans, et cetera. Do we want to look at a fee schedule or have some recommendations from staff?
We always want to say no until we see the budget.
I just have one thing on the budget conversation. I guess I would only be interested in the hard costs and overtime,
Yeah.
not opportunity, just because, that is so squishy. Do we know what other cities are doing as it relates to that?
To like a fee schedule for the fees component?
Yeah, for renting barricades or whatever.
I think, some do certainly have it in their fee schedule where it's lists an hourly rate for, whether it's a public works staff. And you'll see, I think the reporting from Public Works, a lot of it is 3 hours, 2 guys, at this rate, this is what it came down to. So, some communities do list the hourly wages of if you need assistance from Public Works or police department. And some items like you can rent garbage cans for an event, or porta potties, like right now, such a thing, like the event organizers can order them, but if we had it in our fee schedule, then the city just can order them and they pay the fee that we have. So you do see that in some communities, not all of them, but it is a section in fee schedules with some of those basic event functions.
We can definitely bring back some examples too as we move forward. So just in terms of timing, prior to some of the staffing changes that happened through last year, I think we had hoped we would have had some better conversations through the fall of last year and even before now, to where we have an ordinance. We worked on one last year. I'd say we're at a 50% big. I still don't think we'll have ordinances and new policies in place in 24. I think we'd be aiming for a new system in 25. I think we'll bring back some incremental chunks at a few different times through the summer as we're kind of seeing some of these events unfold. Hey, by the way, let's have this conversation. But we'll bring back some of those options and examples of other communities, how they're handling it.
Yeah, to that point on fees, we've got our list of standard benchmark communities. It'd be helpful to just see what those other benchmark communities in particular are doing. And then also maybe look at some communities that are known to just be event heavy. It's just always insightful for us to kind of guide what we're doing and what's right for Forest Lake.
Sure. We can do that. All right, with that, I think I have this direction I need, and if you have any other questions or comments, otherwise we'll work on getting the information back at a future date.
Good work.
Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Next up, planned agenda item on this continuing park theme this evening is athletic field maintenance,
I'm up.
and Dave's up. Thank you.
Mayor and council, switching to athletic field maintenance. As you know, we just did that, approved that pickleball court resurfacing, and that was part of a larger project out at Dunley Fields to rehabilitate them. We also have some funding for Cooling Camp in 2025, and just over the whole CIP with Schilling Park and all those other field maintenances. So we're trying to find a more efficient, effective way to maintain our athletic fields. Slowly, over the past 10 years, we've kind of taken maintenance back. At one point, all the mowing in the city was done contractually. And all the irrigation at Fenway was done contractually, the mowing and all that. So slowly but surely, we're trying to bring it back in-house to have some control on how it looks, how we can maintain it, to be able to control when people are on it, when people are off of it. And so as we go with that, we've been working a lot with FLA and the school district to try to better that situation, to try to make it more efficient, more effective. The latest we have done is scheduling, where everyone goes through we pay a fee, and FLA does to the school district, and they schedule all the games and all the fields, whether it's football or softball or baseball or anything, across not just Fenway, but at Cooling Camp, at Schilling Park, and school district fields. So they have a very good idea of where people are at what times. And even with Public Works, we're able to work with the school district, knowing when there's blocks of time when there's not going to be somebody on a field or fields where we can get in and do maintenance and get out. And alternatively, schedule time. We call Kyle at the school to say, hey, we need 7 days of nobody on one of these football fields because we have to get out there and not have people being grassed up. So that's worked very well. It's a very good process. The next step though is infield maintenance. That's the last thing that we really struggle with. Admittedly, we do a horrible job at it. We just don't have the equipment or the staff to do it. Right now, we drag the fields at Schilling and Belts, that one field at Belts. The school district does all their fields. FLPA, the baseball squad, handles their fields at Cooling Camp, and FLA does the dragging at fields at Fenway. Just, there's too many people doing too many things where the thought is we should, either the city should come back and give the equipment and staff to do our fields, or maybe a better way is to have the school district do that as well, since they're scheduling and they know where the fields are being used, either for games or practices, and be able to do that. That of course would take an agreement, and right now there is no agreement. We have a scheduling agreement and a use agreement, but there's nothing that goes along the line of infield maintenance. So that kind of the questions tonight is, does the city council want to get into the city doing infield maintenance? I mean, there's plenty of cities that do, and there's plenty of cities that don't want to touch it because there's extra staff, overtime, and just that type of equipment that you have to buy, drags and specialized equipment for the fields. So that would be an additional, first off question. If we're not interested in doing that, would the council be willing to entertain or to have staff, work with FLA and the school district to see if we can come with some type of agreement where one of these groups does the infield maintenance, and whether we participate with shared service or financially, that you don't have too many people doing one thing. And we're going to be making a significant investment in Fenway Fields, which is, it's a significant amount of money. We're basically bringing them back to day one quality. And the plan is to do the same out in Cooling Camp as well, as get those fields back to level and laser graded and all that. So really don't wanna screw this up, you know, and we wanna have a plan, and we really don't, I don't recommend doing anything out at Fenway until we have a plan of how these are gonna get contained. You know, and I don't, it's not so much control, but we wanna have our skin in the game of who's dragging it, if they're trained, if they, you know, on the weekends of the tournament. I'd rather have us or a school district person drag those fields versus a volunteer parent, you know, it doesn't seem like it's difficult, but there's a way of maintaining the field to make it last a lot longer. And it's partially the city's fault and our fault that we let the fields get to that point, right? But we're gonna be making, you know, it's approximately about a $200,000 investment on Fenway, and we wanna make sure that's the right decision going forward. So that's the questions is, you know, council, we want staff and myself to look into what it would cost for the city to staff this and to get equipment, and what it would cost throughout the summer to maintain these. If not, you know, would you like us to talk to the school district of Flaw, see if we can work out some type of agreement and bring that back to see what that looks like, or maybe both, and just to compare those numbers up.
Dave, I want to make sure I understand. So the proposal would be a single provider to do Bells Park, Coolan Camp, and Fenway? Those are the...
To do all the fields in the district.
Yeah.
To do the school fields, Fenway fields, Coolan Camp fields, Chili Park Belts, anything that gets added.
Anything, okay.
It's it's taken care of by
Single
one
source.
entity. It'd say if it was the city, we may do some and contract some out to other, name your company that does ball, and there's other cities that do that, you contract out, they charge X amount per field, it's $40 or $50 per field, or the school district over, you know, it's their umbrella over top of all the fields, and they figure out who does what, and when this, you know. The beauty of it now is that we have a schedule. We know at Fenway 2, there's a game at 5 o'clock, so you know that needs to be dragged and chopped by 5 o'clock. And there's a practice at Field 5 at Fenway, you don't need to chalk that one, so it's saving up on costs, and you're not duplicating two things. And I mean, in Flaw's done the same thing, they went and dragged all the fields, and then there was no games over. So you're trying to make this way more efficient and make more sense, and it's kind of like the refuse hauler, right? It's a lot easier if you have a single hauler, and instead of a bunch of other people trying to make it work together.
May I add just one quick follow-up comment to that? So with the field scheduling, which has been really favorable to FLA and the school district as an efficient process, as Dave mentioned, we now have a schedule so we know when there's the games and practices. One of the goals of the city is to, now that we know when the fields are being scheduled, we also have identified gaps that are now opportunities for other groups to reserve the fields as well. And as you saw in the 2024 fee schedule, we do have other fees for club tournaments, other user groups. And so those groups will be charged the fees per the fee schedule, which is additional revenue to support maintaining and improving. So the enhanced and efficient field scheduling now creates this opportunity for other user groups. But the city doesn't have that one-stop shop for the field prep. So if we have another, like a club tournament come to town and they're like, okay, here's our game schedule for the weekend, what are we gonna, what do we tell them for the field prep or that maintenance? Right now, we wouldn't have an answer for them. And I think having one identified go-to for the in-field work would really, it's needed for those other cases as we start to schedule out our fields more. The demand is there, so it's just a process of getting that word out, but we need to have this in place before we can really continue to schedule it further.
Dave, so I would guess on these initial conversations that the district's open to this would be somewhat favorable, it sounds like?
Yeah, we've talked to them for the past probably year about some type of either a shared use or a financial, kind of like financial with the scheduling. They're kind of stuck. They're big enough where they're at to keep their staff, but if they were a little bigger, they'd probably be able to get a full-time employee to be able to do more there and ice arena and do other school district stuff, but they're in that weird spot where they have enough work certain times, but not enough work in other. So it's one of those conversations, do they hire a full-time employee to do more of the infield, or is it, it was be a financial contribution, or would it be the city, close the outfield at, one of their school fields, or a football field, and then that frees up some of the full-time staff in one of the buildings. So I think that would need to get fleshed out a little bit more, or what that financials would be, and who would contribute. Would it be the user groups that would be paying, for this? Would it be a pass-through from the user groups, considering that they would not be having to pay for this to get maintaining more income? So just kind of like when we took over Des Moines, it's, they started paying us an annual sum because we were doing the grass, so it might be that too. But we need all three of, between FLA, the school district, and the city to have that agreement. Whoever that person is that's going to be doing that maintenance, it's either going to be a financial or a shared service or something.
Baseball Association also gets added to that, right? Because are they doing their own?
I consider them as FLA, but FLBA, they're doing their own thing out in Bloomington.
Right.
So whether they're doing it themselves, I think they're paying somebody to do it. But the hope would be to bring everything under one umbrella, which, like I said, would take buy-in from all groups. But with that, we just want support from the council on that we're not trying to take work away from somebody or give work to somebody else. We're interested in it because we want good fields. We want to maximize our field usage, and an agreement that everybody can work with. So.
It just seemed to me that if there's some cooperation between us and the school, it'd be to me, it seems like the best way to handle this, because, like you said, you gotta have somebody that knows what they're doing. They're, just grading off these, playing fields and that sort of thing, and cutting grass and whatever. So.
Doing it in fields like one lawn, you don't go the same direction every time. Sometimes you go in, sometimes you go out the side, sometimes you go side to side, and it's, to try to keep all the A line in one spot instead of making those big bounds out by second base. That's just really spinning it every single time.
Well, during this effort, what would work best for you, David? Do you have any suggestions at all?
Well, it would come with the cost. It's one of those things where I think that's where those discussions come in. Sit down as a group and figure what makes the most sense between these groups to do what. The scheduling was a no-brainer because the district had software they had it all set up. It was basically us plunking in our fields. So we may have a discussion and say, it's obviously the school district there, they have the best suited for it, or obviously it's FLA, or obviously it's a city.
I think it's just really evaluating the best use of resources that we all have between FLA, the city, and the school. So for example, the school district invested in a robot to paint multi-use fields, and they can set the robot out, I don't just got some name, and set him out, and he can go paint the field like pretty quickly and efficiently. So I think the city, the school, and FLA would all be, why not do that or explore that, because it's cost effective and efficient. And so it's really just finding that and strengthening that partnership. When we identified the field scheduling arrangement, it was very well received by FLA because they're already going to the school district, scheduling their indoor facilities, already familiar with the staff doing that. And it was just, like Dave said, all we had to do was add in our few fields to theirs. So the city didn't have to invest and spend city dollars on more technology when it already existed in the district. So I really think it's evaluating those strengths that each partner can bring to the table to be the most efficient and cost effective for the community as a whole.
I agree, it makes sense to look at it as in advance of us making the significant investment in the field improvements that have been, to Susan's point earlier, asked for a very long time. It'd be great to get those projects done, and so this is part of us kind of upping our game and making sure those fields are maintained in the best way possible, and we don't end up in the situation that we've ended up where we've just, things have deteriorated. So I think now is a good time to do it. Obviously the costs are always the hard part where the road meets the road, and so seeing what the impact would be for some of those pass-through entities, ultimately I suspect will guide some of that decision, but we won't know that until we pull everyone to the table and have that conversation. So I think it's a wise move.
Yeah, I'm favorable for staff to have that conversation with the school and FLA regarding maintenance and scheduling.
All right, I think Susan had a comment. Jim, I don't want to butt in, but it's up to you.
Yes, please.
May I suggest that performance standards need to be integral to whatever? Especially in the summertime when Public Works having employees on vacation, they've got a lot of things that come up suddenly. There have been issues with fields being mowed to a sports depth. And so, anything that would happen, we would need to make sure that there are performance standards, and how would the various organizations, force like baseball, school district, city, FLA, how would we be able to enforce those performance standards so that fields are playable when games, practices are scheduled?
Yeah, we just gotta figure out how.
Quality of field and timing. Yeah, agree. Dave, would that be part of those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, that'll get a little in the weeds because not all of us do this, like, we don't mow all the grass at all the school district fields, so, you know, like right now, Fenway we mow twice a week. You know, so I doubt the school district has the staff or the time to mow all their fields twice a week. You know, so, the infield, yes, you can set a performance standard on that. I mean, and I'm sure whoever does that will be trained in infield maintenance and will be able to train their staff to do stuff the correct way. The grass is a little tough just because some are irrigated, some aren't, you know, some are, there's a difference between Fenway and Belton Street. It's just, you're gonna have a tournament or higher end games at Fenway versus Belton where it's more of a neighborhood park or maybe a t-ball game or something like that, so. Yeah, I mean, I think we can chat about that, but I don't know how strict we can get on that. Maybe it's a certain level of fields where those standards come
Start somewhere.
Any other points of feedback? Dave, Jamie, anything else you needed from us on this topic?
So this contract that we have with FLA, just specifically at Fenway, is through 2024, so the hope would be that this agreement would start at 25, and we can still get the rehab done this fall. So I think the goal would be to reach out to Al when he gets back, or FLA and the school district, start these talks sooner than later, and see if we can have a framework of an agreement in the next relatively soon, so we can still bid off that work and get it done. So the goal would be to have that work done right after Labor Day. Just shut all the fields down after Labor Day so you can get through. You might not be able to have fall ball, but don't also let them know that they can have fall ball. That's about 120 days or so you don't want to touch. They're going to do some solid work and just, you know, soft infield. And you can let it sit through the winter and just start 25 with brand new fields and a brand new maintenance program. I think that's the end goal. So hopefully we can have some discussions and come back in a month or two and have maybe not a full agreed agreement, but yeah, I think all sides are pretty favorable to this. Go ahead and get some quotes for an agreement. That sounds like a plan.
Sounds good. Yes. All right, we'll move on to our next topic, which is the Belts Park grant. Broader Belts Park discussion plan. Who's kicking this off?
I'm glad
Abby
here.
is.
Yep.
Thank you.
So included in your packet was a report, very long, there's a lot of information in there, but my staff report kind of outlined quite a bit of history of Belts Park and the planning that has gone on since 2014 with the adoption of the current Parks, Trails, and Open Space Plan, which identified Belts as being the second most frequently used park in the city. It also called for certain improvements to include basketball court resurfacing, tennis court resurfacing, provide teen amenities, and provide a trail to the park. In 2018, the former Parks, Trails, Lakes Commission did start working with the school district's political action committee to work with youth, 7th grade through 12th grade, to identify some needs in the park. That really then started kicking off a planning process that lasted through 2021. And a big portion of the materials in your packet tonight was that planning process that occurred over several years and all the public engagement that occurred with the community about Bounce Park. So in the spring of 22, the city did have a master plan, a phasing plan, and cost estimates. And those are, for the most part, other than the cost estimates, the last 2 pages of the packet, pages 91 and 92. At the time, the former Parks Commission and the council approved the submittal of a grant application to the Minnesota DNR. There was concern expressed by the Parks Commission pretty significantly throughout the way about some plans, some portions of the plan, specifically irrigation of the ball fields and fencing. Those aren't included or shown on the master plan, but was expressed at the time. In the fall of the 22, the city did accept a $300,000 grant for the project at Belts Park. The phasing plan, and there is copies of that as well in front of you today, identified the grant would be for phase 1, which was specifically the playground, the pavilion, and ADA accessible walkways through the park. At the time, when we started to look at cost estimates, it looked like it was going to be, at that time, $2.2 million project. So we started to talk about a 3-year phased approach to be able to finance the entire development of the park. But at the time, the council did direct us to keep moving forward with the project for phase 1, that $300,000 grant with the $860,000 cash match from the city for the 1 point something that just kind of kept growing project. 2023 in the fall, we brought back before you $1.3 million phase 1 project, and we identified that all the bids were over the estimated cost, construction cost for phase 1. We did talk about some of the challenges with the phasing schedule for the project, but the council at that time rejected all bids. And during budget talks, started to talk about the potential for court reconstruction and warming house improvements up in the southwest corner. So as a reminder, Belts has kind of that grade separation. We started to talk about the need to maybe do some of the improvements in a different order. At that time, the council had said, bring this back for discussion. And if we weren't going to move forward with the playground project, we'd need to do some formal action with the DNR grant. I did note in my staff report, the grant is very specific in that it really can only be for those phase 1 improvements. The playground, the pavilion, the ADA accessible walkways through the park. It does also indicate that every feature within the park does need to be accessible. So the grant is requiring us to remove playground equipment that we would have otherwise had planned to keep there. It also requires us to put walkways to areas that will have to be disturbed in subsequent projects in the future. Those are things we just really didn't know until we had kind of finalized that grant at the end of 22 with the DNR and worked through that construction document process with the DNR. So some questions for you tonight. Does council want to do a project at Belts? And then subsequently, what project do you want to do? I included in my staff memo some kind of pros and cons of both projects. That being the phase 1, the pavilion, the playground, the walkways project. The other one, as discussed during the budgeting process, the court reconstruction project. Staff's recommendation, I'm happy to go through it if you'd like, but I figured I would throw this out to you for conversation.
Thank you, Abby. I am struggling in my pad those questions.
Yep, it is on page 14, 15, 14.
There we go. Should we start with question one? Actually,
Could I just make a suggestion that they speak up? It's very, very difficult to hear back here.
oh, very good.
Thank you.
Can we, so before we jump into discussion, any clarifying questions or overall comments before we jump into some of the more specific questions in front of us? All right, let's jump in, and if everyone could raise their voices a little bit. There is a white noise machine or something blowing behind me, so I don't know if everyone else is also hearing that. That makes sound in this room a little challenging, so let's just talk loud. Should we start with our first question around, do we want to do a project at Belts Park? First question on the table and open to some discussion, feedback.
We definitely need to do something there. It's a mess.
Yeah, I wanna see something happen at Belts Park. As you know, from my point of view for parks, from this last budget conversation, I think first, or maybe as we're having this conversation too, since we approved the parks ordinance over a year ago, I would like to see people get on the parks board, because I don't want us to go down. So what happened last time with Belts Park, for a quick recap for people in the audience, is that we kept getting further with the Belts Park plan, and then we had a park board, and then the park board, most of the people resigned or quit from the park board, and then we continued with the Belts Park plan, and then once we got bids, we put a hold on it, because we felt like it didn't go through the proper channels because there wasn't the Parks Board. And so the city council felt like there wasn't enough communication from the community, from that board, in order to move forward with the bids. And so I want there to be a plan for Belts Park. I just don't want us to get to a point where we don't have a Parks Board and we're not going through that proper channel. And so I do want something to happen with Belts Park, but so I would also sooner rather than later, and then also sooner rather than later, I'd like to see people on that Parks Board.
Part of that plan for the Belts Park has to be in agreement with the church for parking, because there's no parking here. And little or none, little or apparent. But some kind of agreement has to be made there too. That's going to be part of the cost. There's certainly a lot of favorable input with people that would like to see something happen at the park there. So there's a couple things to throw out there.
I'm definitely in favor of us proceeding with a project at Belts Park. It's been a commitment for a very long time, and to not do anything out there just absolutely isn't the right answer. I have some mixed feelings on timing on appointing a new park commission, and do we do this before or after? That probably just isn't the right answer. My concern, what's challenging about this project is the timeline and the costs as they've changed over time. And so on one hand, I just think if we're gonna seat a park commission in the middle of this, we need to just do a lot of joint working sessions, because we're seating essentially a new group at a project that is very close to a starting spot, and that can just be a tough place for re-engagement and introduction. And so I think that feedback is certainly, we would all benefit from that feedback, and there's always value in that, but also that can be a lot of pressure for a new commission. So I just would want us to tee that up with a lot of joint working sessions and just getting us all on the same page. And then strong alignment back to budget and timing, because seeing how those costs escalated and seeing the impact to overall budget, that certainly impacted my decision to not proceed this fall. Not having a park commission was part of that, but again, I think that's more of a council, that's our responsibility, and again, that's part of where I think things just went off the rails, is costs escalated. And when we're attached to a $300,000 grant that requires balloon to over $1 million of improvements, makes that really a really challenging project, and I think it became a much larger project than what anyone had anticipated at the beginning. So there's a whole host of things that are on the things that should have been better list, but that's, I'm anxious to get a park commission reappointed as soon as we decide it's the right time and staff's in the spot to be able to support that. I just want to make sure that we're also as a council, like supportive of walking through that process together, because we can't just hand it to them and say, hey, figure it out, because we've spent a lot of time and haven't ended up in the right place. So it's going to take a lot of work, I think, from council to get us to that conclusion and to get the confidence that we've got it fully funded and a plan that works for the community and all of those things. That was a long answer to one question, but any other thoughts on should we do a Belts Park project?
I would agree with that. We definitely need to do something. I think that, to your point on the grant and how that got us to another level on cost, complicated things, it seems like obviously on the council's not involved in those conversations. And so, when you look at this layout here and trying to do something with what's existing there, tennis to pickleball, the pickleball thing is such a popular, let's be relevant to what's happening now. The basketball courts, maybe augmenting this field to make it a really nice field. I know that the park board didn't want irrigation on a field, but maybe if it's just one field out there, maybe we do and make that a really nice field. I know in the survey there was a lot of things about park pavilions and some picnic shelters. I would tend to go away from that a little bit to save some money and not knowing what the use is. I know that the gazebo at Lakeside gets requested a lot, so maybe that would offset some of that. So I definitely want to do something. I think we need to do something. That 2.2 million with all the issues we have with roads and everything, that's what scared me, was that dollar amount, just to put into one park.
Just a quick comment too, kind of, obviously I was involved from the start to present, so I've seen it all. The main focus, obviously, community feedback. It's one of the second most utilized parks. It's really, in the neighborhood area where a lot of families tend to go to, and evaluating with the Parks Commission through different processes in like 2016 and 2019, that really the community only has Lakeside Memorial Park for like larger family gatherings, renting a gazebo, and with the desire of the community for Belts Park to have that community feel with a nice pavilion that has space you can rent for family gatherings and birthday parties, etc. That really drove the priorities, and that was listed in the master plan for parks as a second priority improvement. And really when we started talking about it at the commission level, and what triggered really the grant application is accessibility in the park. And when I had somebody that was in a wheelchair talk to me and say that they had to be lifted into the park because they can't get in a wheelchair, that really kind of sprung that conversation of like really looking at the accessibility components. There's no great access given the slopes, and the fencing that was there was not ADA compliant, so you couldn't even get a wheelchair through. So a lot of it really stemmed from how do we make this an accessible, right? And that's where the accessible playground, we have some equipment at Lakeside Memorial Park, but as you start to research and understand what other communities are doing, there's a huge strive for accessibility. And when you can't even physically get into the park in a wheelchair or with a stroller if you're a parent, think of it from that way, that's a lot of what really stemmed that. And then as Abby mentioned, that's where we applied for accessibility features to get people into the park. Well, then that came with, okay, now everything needs to have access. Then the phasing project, we realized, okay, if we do phase 1, well, then that's going to get affected when we get to phase 2 or phase 3. So that was really complicated. So I think a master plan is that. It's a plan and it's a guiding document of what we would like to see. I think that just kind of taking that step back, educating community that we have the desire to improve it. We still have some challenges to work through. Sometimes master plans can take 2 years, they can take 10 years until you can fully fund them. So it's a process. They don't have to take 10 years, but you also need to align funding for it. So that's just kind of that history of things to keep in mind, like the accessibility, letting your residents in the community like physically be able to get into the park and feel welcome there. So that's kind of where we got to the grant and where we are. I think next steps, I think, great, let's maybe just pause and see where we, reevaluate what that priority might be.
Do you want that question, just, can we get a little further in our discussion? Can you hold just, let's get a little further in our discussion? Don't forget your question. Okay. Can we move into, are we ready to move into maybe question 2?
Sure.
So question 2 is, what should staff be considering as we're considering what does that project look like? In our packet was kind of a side-by-side version. Do we have a way of putting the packet on the screen? There's a side-by-side version of what was the original plan and what is it potentially a kind of a court rehab-based plan. While Abby's pulling that up on screen, Tim, do you wanna provide or ask your question?
Yeah, my name is Tim Gary, and I used to be on the Parks Commission when we were talking about the Belts Park. And there had been a survey done of what the community wanted. And they wanted a ball field where you could go by and just have a family outing. One of the things that we were concerned about back then even was the cost and the budget. And the engineer kept throwing this irrigated field to the tune of $300,000 into this thing. We're going, this isn't a travel field. This is a skin field with just dirt or ag line. And for whatever reason, they kept picking this thing back in for the $300,000 or more. The guys don't. We're telling you, no, they don't want it. We've got our survey. Survey didn't want it. The community didn't want it. They keep wanting it. And I mean, I live a block away from it. And the number of times I see kids out there spinning donuts or whatever else, it'd be a waste of money to make that Belts Park field a travel field or a nice field with grass infield and irrigation, whatever else. Total waste of money. Anyway, that's me.
Well, part of that conversation at this point too was the parking, and if you do have it be prepared and made for organized activities and games, think of, okay, how many kids on a team and all the people coming, just the lack of parking, and that would draw almost too big of a group there, so that was some of the conversation tied into that.
Abby, when I reviewed through the package, I was reviewing with the lens of, are you seeing this column on the right as a potential near-term alternative to the original plan? Is that how you're intending to present?
Well, so our original project with the phase 1 is what we were awarded the grant for, $1.2 million project. So we would get $300,000, but we would have to spend $860,000 out of the city's capital improvement or parks dedication fund. It would drain our park dedication fund. The pros to that, nearly half the park would be new. It provides accessibility in and throughout the park, meeting a lot of those goals that we heard of through those planning processes. And the pavilion would provide that community gathering space, but as I noted already, it would deplete the park dedication fund. It leaves the redevelopment incomplete. We lose some existing features, so that upper playground, as I mentioned, would have to go away. And then the courts wouldn't be rehabilitated. During the budget discussions, the council brought up the Belts courts, and you might remember you heard presentation from the pickleball community. You've even seen public emails lately of just comparing the courts at Fenway to the courts at Belts. They've been neglected. We haven't done maintenance, good quality maintenance to keep up on that. And I think they're aged out. I don't know, but I think that they're probably past their useful life. Court rehabilitation, it would include rehabilitating the courts and making minor warming house improvements. The estimate right now is about $650,000. That wouldn't deplete our park funds in any way. It's significantly less. We wouldn't have grant funds for that. The courts would be comparable to industry standards. So the courts that we have at Fenway, we'd have those same courts at Belts, right? Like, we're gonna start improving them and be consistent with the community. It wouldn't impact future phases of the development because it's kind of tucked up in that far corner. The improvement aligns with the community input to improve the courts. There'd be an option to potentially add an additional basketball court. And it'd give us additional time to determine appropriate parking. So whether that be on site, we do have plans that do show the potential for street parking or even shared with the adjacent landowner. The con would be we would have to return that grant back to the DNR. And there does come as a potential risk of us not being funded by the DNR after a little bit of time. I do think though that those are conversations that happen and that we can have with the DNR. And I think given the timeline of the project and the complexity and the scope, I don't think it's going to be, I think that they're going to understand.
You think they will understand?
I do think that they will understand. I don't think that they're going to be happy, right? I mean, but we're also in a position where we're too late. We might be too late to do a project of a major phase one.
When does that grant expire?
It expires the middle of this year, but we can extend it for another year if we needed to.
Yeah, because right now it's June, isn't it?
I think it's June of 24, yeah, if I remember correctly.
June or the end of this year?
Yeah.
Every time we're talking about parks and talking about park funding, a couple of things I think it's important to always hold in contention and just make sure we're saying the words out loud. We haven't developed a neighborhood park created a new neighborhood park in over 10 years, I believe. And so we, as a city, have made a decision that we're going to have historically, we had a policy that we were investing in prime parks within the community, Lakeside, Fenway, and Belts Park. That has shifted somewhat in that feedback from residents and feedback for those communities that have been developed without a neighborhood park. There is some challenge to that past policy. That said, that was our past policy, and that is the environment that we have. We have many communities many neighborhoods that are built without a community park. And then the other piece that I still just find shocking is that we don't fund park development through general levy tax dollars. So what you're paying in your property taxes does not include park development or park maintenance. Our only funding source of that historically. Now, council has started in the last couple of years to make changes to that and trying to incrementally add from the general fund into this fund for park maintenance and park development. But up until that point, the only funding source has been new development dollars paid by new developments coming into the community. And so that is, I think as, homeowners, people just think, well, what are my dollars, what are my taxes going for? Well, the reality is we haven't had that funding source. And so it makes these types of decisions really, really challenging because the demand for those funds are great. And our pool of resources of what's coming in is really limited currently. Now, again, council in the last couple of years has started to inch that up a bit. And there is still some motivation to do that, but that's going to take a while to build those dollars. And that just makes, again, this conversation really hard because we haven't had a lot of, us being dependent on those development dollars really restricts what we can do. And when we're in an environment like today where development's a little bit down, those dollars are also down. And we don't have an alternative source of funds that, again, I think it's always got to be kind of talking about what is the root cause and some of those, how did we get to what are some of those decisions that got us to this position? It's just, I think, always just helpful context to, okay, now with that said, what do we do next? And how do we work to something that is probably more comparable to other communities that we think about? Shoreview was brought up tonight. Shoreview probably funds out of their general fund park dedication and park maintenance. I don't have those numbers in my back pocket, but communities where you see that, you see a different funding source than traditionally what Forest Lake has used. Now, the good news is we don't have to continue that, but it does, take some time to change that methodology and to also have those resources available. So when we make these decisions, it's a lot of money dedicated to one small space within the community. And so it's easy as decision makers for us to all get a little analysis paralysis, because we know that whether it's $1.2 million going to Belts Park or $600,000, whatever that number turns out to be, it's dollars that aren't going to another neighborhood park, and we know that there's also a lot of need there. So we're always trying to balance and make the best decisions we can. So just a little context on some of what makes this just such a challenging topic.
I'd like to see that new board commission get seated sooner than later.
Agreed.
Because whether it's needs in individual neighborhoods or it's decided to make a significant investment, whether it be in Belts or, we've heard talk about lighting in Fenway, whatever these big asks are, I think it'd be helpful that there are additional people that are close to the community that are helping to guide that. Thinking about this park, part of our decision process, if I recall, is recognizing that, we're going to put a hold on it because the playground there is actually not too bad.
Right.
It's relatively new. Equipment, it doesn't have the accessibility stuff we talked about, but the courts are brutal.
And some of our better playground equipment.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right, and the courts are brutal.
So, if we're looking to move forward with some decision for 2024, I would throw my weight and support behind, let's do something with the courts, let's bring them up to par, especially laying this out, it's not going to affect other future development, but it's moving us forward. To sit around and wait another year, I think that's a mistake. The other big thing too, thinking about last year's budget cycle that Blake brought up, there was a lot of asks, a lot of big asks. Historically, we've done a terrible job of funding Forest Lake, as you noted. We did the hard work of saying yes to roads. I think we got a great plan in place for that. Parks are the other, what are the other three things that need attention and accompanied with staff? And we just got to make progress on this.
When you mentioned the minor improvements to the Walking House, what does that entail? Any detail on that, Bill?
Some new siding and cleaning it up so it doesn't look like a kid shed sitting in the middle of the park. Try to clean it up a little bit.
Other reactions to potential direction of what's being proposed for?
I'd be favorable to the court rehabilitation. This is similar to what Liv said, so.
One of the challenges on this project has been just the sequencing, and if you do this, then you have to do that, and doing that impacts, another option later on. If we do make a decision to, in the near term, do the court rehab, is that one of the maybe least intrusive that allows us greater options on any number of options in the future? So
it really is, because it's tucked away up in the high corner there. It allows for the rest of the park to still remain open. Right now, if we were going to kind of do that phase one project with the ADA accessible compliant, we'd have to kind of come right across some of those walkways to get to these courts when we wanted to rehabilitate them. Additionally, that just high side is harder to access, and we have to access it through the park. So it'd be probably most ideal for us to do the improvements on the high side of the park in a phased order.
The other comment I had on that, with the benefit of the court rehabilitation project, is those are our only tennis courts in Forest Lake, and people still have interest in playing tennis even though pickleball is taking over the world. That would be beneficial. We do have lights there as well, so those are on a timer so that people can play once it gets dark. And then I believe the plan calls for 2 basketball courts, and currently there's just 1 there, and that was something we also identified in our updates to master planning, where we looked at national standards and where we're deficient. And so I believe that we can fit 2 full court basketball courts, which are heavily used and the only quality basketball courts we have in the community. So I think there would be a positive impact from that regard, knowing that it's a step forward and it would have a positive impact.
Yeah, because it seems like we're focusing too much on the PNR grant, which is that one phase where you have to do all accessibility. It would be accessibility to the court, so and I think we need to back off on that a little bit, because we're focused our whole thing on this one grant.
With that, if we ultimately decide to go forward with that, to your point earlier, we gotta have an agreement with the neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where everybody's gonna park.
But these other funding sources could go into that, though. You know, like the Rotary and Lions and all that could help us out there a little bit.
Well, the Rotary contribution is very specific to accessible, some accessible features.
Okay. So
But other
that's
than
tied to
that,
too.
There are other grant opportunities. I've explored, Minnesota Timberwolves has like a court rehabilitation grant, which I think was listed in the documents. I've looked into that, certainly could reach out to them. There's other opportunities we could seek out if the direction is to explore just the court rehabilitation right now and get estimates, and we could identify potential.
The thing of it is, we can't afford to do the whole rehabilitation here. So it makes sense if everybody's wanting to do those parts first. At least you're getting something done.
Is part of the court, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. Is part of the court rehabilitation plan to, it's on the memo, but I just want to make sure, it's also to reach out to the church and make an arrangement with parking. Us rehabbing those courts is going to increase demand, and we need to have that parking agreement in place, is that?
Yeah, so the parking agreement, both parties didn't come to agreeable terms of what was needed, so I think just revisiting that conversation and the city offering something that's agreeable to the church and vice versa, so that we're making sure we're both satisfied, and that's where we didn't get there. And then obviously, that's a big part of it, so that needs to happen and we engage that conversation.
Karen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's really hard to sit here and hear some of this stuff that is just absolutely not right. And if you want to go back to a partnership with the church that's there, and if you want to listen to the community, and if you want to believe the commission at that time said, the bathroom was the number one thing that the community wanted. It's the number one thing that Father said he would be very agreeable. If you remember that, that was his number one thing, because the park users also use the church bathroom. And he's under the understanding that he doesn't want to put a no public bathroom, because he doesn't want to keep people out of the church. Yeah. So he had some very valid reasons and some very valid concerns for the community, and I don't even hear that mentioned. When we say we're going to put a little paint on that building, that wasn't the problem. It wasn't the idea from the community.
Is there an opportunity for, short of building a whole new building with new plumbing, is there an opportunity to upgrade or improve the restroom facilities out there? I don't know what that looks like.
I guess I'll maybe defer to Dave on this one, but my thought is no, other than like building the new facility. And that's when with the grant application, given the community feedback on the importance of actual bathrooms and like a drinking fountain, because there is water and sewer nearby, that made it feasible. That is why that was included in the grant project. The city could have done the grant for just the playground. Obviously, scope of the project would have been less, but we did include it because that was a big demand and request from the community. And to the point made that we do have a portable restroom at the park, but people are going to the church to use the restrooms there.
So it doesn't have sewer and water service, I mean, it's close, so you'd have to have a sewer line and a water line. And I guess the point of just adding the siding or cleaning up is to make it look nice for the time being. So we all know, and at some point in time, there's going to be a pavilion there, probably a bathroom and all this stuff, but right now it just looks like a crappy tin shed in the middle of the park. So it's just let's make it look nice until the Parks Commission or whoever decides what we want this master plan to look like. It wasn't made concrete that we're just gonna put some siding on it and then that's complete forever. So that wasn't the intent at all. It was more of let's just try to make it look nice for maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years until, you know, funding's there to finish off the second phase. So otherwise it'd be a pretty large investment to run sewer, water, and you'd have to renovate that warming house to put a bathroom in there and I don't know that, so.
I think, you know, this is step one, phase one of, like, a pavilion with bathrooms and all that. Well, let's hope we can get there, that the community wants to fund that, because I would be in favor if the community backed that, but to get these courts, Mr. Hagwood sent an email, pictures of those courts. I mean, I've been on those courts, it's been a number of years, I was appalled by the condition of those things were, and so that right there got me like, okay, this is, something has to happen now. So we can get there, it's baby steps, get to pavilion and the bathroom and all that, I think that's a win-win.
And the courts are on the master plan, the courts are in the same location as that, so I mean, it wouldn't change any other, if we ended up building exactly how this was, it wouldn't change that the courts would go there and they could get rehab, so it's just probably in the better order, doing that first, making that mess and then working our way back on it, so in reality, it's probably the better way to do it is do them first and then work your way up.
So right now, the bathroom that's out there is on the opposite side of the pavilion away from the courts. I don't know if this is a feasible compromise or an agreeable compromise, but I mean, is it possible to put, you know, some sort of bathroom facilities, portable bathroom facilities closer to where people are gonna park or they're gonna enter the park for playing basketball, for playing pickleball? You know, again, it might not dissuade everybody from walking across the parking lot and using the churches, but it might, like, hey, it's right here, it's not hidden behind a shed that I don't even know is there.
Yeah, and maybe it's a case of adding an additional one there. Keep that, I think the one there is good because the playground is very close, but maybe something on that side. Enclosure, maybe tie that in with the rehab, that you build a pad on there to put shelter in there. It's a good temporary, I think long term you want to try to get away from the outhouse so that you have a full service facility, but
absolutely.
in interim, I don't.
Yeah, because even at the school, there's a playground, where they play ball, they have a lot of porta potties and stuff out there too, same reason. Roll after roll there.
Point of feedback, go ahead.
So I'm hearing that you'd like to do a project, and it sounds like the court rehabilitation warming house improvement project is rising to the top. That would require then the city to return the DNR grant. As the council, you can't make a decision tonight, but are you okay if we prepare those materials to bring back before you at a formal meeting? And then one other just point of clarification. I know there was discussion about appointing a new Parks Commission. I completely agree that that's something that we need to be exploring. I guess the question is, are you comfortable with us starting to look at the costs associated with court rehabilitation and the projects involved before that commission is seated? I just would have concerns bringing on a new commission. They're not going to be able to make this decision easier than I think you would have been able to tonight.
So I'd like to see us do a couple of things. So one is, we've done a little bit of a recruiting effort for boards and commissions, and staff implemented a new process that's been fabulous for commission onboarding. So let's continue that specific for parks. But then also as part of that planning, I'd also like to see us put together a work plan and kind of based on this, kind of my comments previously around council and that new commission needing to really make sure we're on the same page or have the same level of information. Onboarding that new commission is going to provide a lot of background information that would be just good for council on where are we and how did we get here, and a lot of that foundational information. So maybe more of a hands-on with council included onboarding than we might do otherwise, and then start to identify what do we need that commission focused on in the near term. and, you know, teeing them up with some freedom to do that work, and then with the planned intersection points on, you know, when is council also included? I think we can accomplish both objectives of having an engaged commission, but then also, you know, we've got a lot of park decisions to make this year, and so let's just have those planned working sessions, so we're kind of doing the work together, and getting the benefit of having that council or that commission on board. So, does that sound?
So, something to say. Why would you need a Parks Commission? I mean, if you're gonna make the decision anyways, like Fenway gets its, you know, resurfacing, and you guys approve that. But yet, we want a Parks Commission to, you know, help you fix belts when you know what needs to be fixed, and it's ultimately your guys' decision. So what's the point of even having it?
Fair question. I mean, we're just talking about 2 park decisions of a whole host of, you know, there's a whole community of parks that needs attention and needs prioritization. And
Fenway gets, you know, resurfacing a really nice pickleball court, and belts, obvious huge cracks, just gets, oh, we needed the Parks Commission in order to do this. How does that make any sense?
I think we're looking for a Parks Commission to have a broader, I mean, to be advisory on those decisions. I hear your feedback on, it sounds like you're not listening to a Parks Commission. But I disagree with that. I think this board and this council wants that feedback and wants that working relationship. When you look at our 10-year plan, you know, we started putting together the 10-year plan a few years ago, and we started with infrastructure, and we've layered in. The least developed of that 10-year plan is the parks component, and we desire that feedback. We want that working relationship.
But Mayor, we're not gonna hold off on doing the courts until a Parks Commission is seated, right?
No,
And I think that was his
that wouldn't
concern,
happen.
So we would move forward this year with exploring the cost for the court reconstruction, the warming house improvements to include the
That's the
visible
point I want to
restroom,
make, like, you're still
while
talking.
also seeking to
Correct.
seat a commission.
Correct.
Just for the record, and for all those that are room that might be interested, Mr. Hegberg, we only have
We're gonna end up on a commission before the
about a
end of the night.
handful of applicants of people that would be interested in serving. So if you know folks that are interested, feel free to reach out to staff. We can get you the application form.
Blake, I think you had a question.
Well, that was, the
Okay.
question was just, we want to move forward without a CEO board, so.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. I think there's a lot of value in the commission as an advisory board, engage in the community, provide feedback, not only on, you know, events and programs, but what are those priorities? And I think with all of the conversations parks, I think those broader conversations of how we have 10, 15 plus years of deferred maintenance at our neighborhood parks. We have just, you know, different developments that need a park, or, you know, consideration. So how can we get there as a city, and what are some funding opportunities? And I think those are really good council commission discussions, and you know, other communities have gone through a whole variety of different funding mechanisms, because with the scope of work to get caught up or to be progressive, it's not likely it will be funded through park dedication dollars and or tax levy dollars. That'll be another 15 or 20 years. So I really like the idea of commission council discussions on those more strategic funding opportunities, and just explore what are other communities, have they done, what have they not done, what's worked well, what hasn't. So I think that'd be a great next step in the, like, all things parks and finalizing an updated master plan. So everyone has a clear roadmap moving forward.
Any other points from council on this? Staff, do you have what you need from us on this topic?
I think we've got a good direction to go here.
Direction. Anything else from anyone that's in the audience tonight? Any other thoughts? Susan?
One of the issues with parks is that the council has increased the density for housing development in a very significant amount of the city. And with that increase in density, that means small yards, that means more parking on streets, things like that, and greatly reduces the opportunities for folks to play. In addition, when a facility like an apartment building says we're building a pool or we're building something, we need to think about whether or not that completely obviates their need to put in park dedication dollars. Or whether that does completely, they will take care of all of their own recreation. So it's sort of, I'm hoping that there will be some overlap between the decisions that the council is making regarding density and development, and also, quite frankly, increasing the park dedication fees. We didn't do that we didn't increase that for a very, very, very long time. And there is going to be a greater need for park facilities with the kind of development that the city is now.
See, that's exactly why we need a park commission.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But they also need to understand the effects that
Right,
other.
They have that discussion, they could bring that, and I agree.
And that was, the parks dedication fees have been increased in the last few years. They're definitely up for review again, but just within the last year, there's also new state laws that really have an impact on what can be charged as park dedication fees and have to be analyzed on a case-by-case situation versus like a per unit charge, and there has to be a nexus between the project and the need in the community. It's a lot more complicated than just a flat fee. So probably not the greatest for relying on park dedication funds in the future. So I think, yes, definitely evaluating, projecting out what we could see potentially coming in for park dedication, but I think it's not going to
Parents.
Yes, it just, Clay Bush brought that up because that is one of the things the commission was good at, evaluating when the development comes in. Do you want to take money, or do you want to take parkland? Do you want to have them put it in, do you want to have the city? I mean, these are things, all things that are vetted out there. And I will go to my grave probably soon, who knows, but not knowing why in my city, that you had qualified, capable, caring people that were trying to help in some of these decisions. And because they leave, you have to believe there's some reason that they left, because they still care about their community. So I'll go to my grave wondering why no one has tried to solve any of these problems by asking some of the people that worked with Jamie on these very issues. I didn't mean to come on strong about the Bathroom Public Works. We love them. They always are right there for us. And I'm just saying that the commitment that was made 3 years ago, probably now more than 3.5 years ago, was that bathroom, and not another porta potty, that a bathroom was going to be put in there and a year-round facility. Now, do I think that's first? No, I've been looking at parks for 30 years. Basketball courts have been terrible, not terrible, tennis courts have been actually dangerous. But there was never enough money to do it right, so we put a facelift on it. And it's time that we do it right so that you don't have to keep putting a facelift on it. So I'm not here to say don't do the tennis courts. They're certainly needed. But just try to listen to people who really care and figure out what the history was, why the decisions were made, if the grant can be taken or not, Rotary money, if it's there or not. There are just so many unanswered questions that I really think could have been solved with just involving the people that were in there and that really cared. So tennis courts need to be done. They need to be done for a long time. But I don't know. Sorry, it just wasn't even going to speak, and I am.
Jamie, I was just wondering, did they ever change, or is it still kind of a complicated matter? It seemed like at one point in time, the storage units weren't being charged park dedication fees because there wasn't a statute for that. Did that ever change? And I know we had talked at one point in time, Patrick had said that, it was a big legal issue to change some sort of ordinance so that we could then charge the storage units. Do you know anything?
I don't know anything off the top of my head, but I can certainly look back and notes and find an answer out can get back to you on that. I don't know right now.
Like I said, it just seemed like all of a sudden we got storage units, they were sliding under the radar because there was no requirement.
I think you're talking about something with the commercial fees, but I'd have to look that up
Yep.
and could get back to you.
That question though does highlight a concern I have. I mean, those types of fees are, been challenged in other communities, and it used, 20 years ago, those were a very sure funding source, and there's many places across the state where those types of fees are really being challenged. And so we can certainly continue to use them as legally, as we are legally able to, but it's also one of those areas where us continuing to levy zero just isn't helpful. And thankfully, we've started to move off of that, but we're in a spot where we've got to pay for this stuff, and we've got to just build it into what is part of having a home in Forest Lake. And yes, it's nice to have new developments pay for new things, but we're talking about, a 30-year tennis court or plus long, older tennis court on Belts Park. I'm challenged with a new developer having to pay for that, right? Like, that should be kind of all of us. The new developer should be paying for the new stuff. And so let's use those fees where we can, but let's also not be overly reliant on them, and because we have, and it just hasn't gotten us to a good spot.
So you're saying they're being challenged, like in court, or they're challenging the?
Yeah, there's lots of areas around where the courts are challenging the municipality's ability to use fees, development fees, to fund projects, and it's just become a more restrictive environment. We have to just continue to keep an eye on that and make sure that what we're doing is legal. And we continue to see, there was recently a Woodbury case related to street fees that was pretty restrictive, and so we just have to, again, we can only react to what we're legally able to do, but the environment isn't encouraging more of that. The environment is being more restrictive, and that's also partly why, as a council, we've started to really push on how are we funding, and really needing to have more of a community-based approach, especially on the maintenance side, where we're kind of paying for our own stuff because it's part of our community and part of what we need to maintain. So it's, challenging for sure. Any other points of topic? I really appreciate everyone being here tonight and for the candid feedback. I hope this more open format works for everybody. We always, as council, I feel like we always benefit from just some more informal dialogue, and always appreciate everyone being here. We're at the end of our planned agenda, so unless anyone has anything else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. And a motion, is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.